Well, welcome everyone to the Mira Fellowship podcast, where we get a chance to know our fellows a little bit more deeply and check in with their progress on their projects.
Hi everyone, my name is Apekshita. You can also call me Apex, which is really a nickname for me that took off with my fellow fellows, and it's been really nice to have a new identity with the Mira Fellowship. Heat Watch works towards driving awareness and attention to the problem of extreme heat in India, but we have ambitions to, of course, talk about heat all over the world. As we all know, heat is really one of the most fundamental problems of climate change, and it impacts people very differently. It impacts people who are working outdoors differently than people who are indoors. It impacts the elderly differently, women differently, people with comorbidities differently. So that's the topic we talk about, we try to drive awareness towards, and we also push for policy changes. So that's in very briefly, that's the work that I have started to do at the fellowship, and I will continue to.
That's wonderful. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Did you bring something that inspired you?
I did, and this was early on in the fellowship when Mira Fellowship sent us this frame and told us that you can add a post-it to the frame so it acts like a little frame on your desk and you can read it, and it really reinforces like a goal that you have and something that you want to do, and it's so much more neater than having a post-it on your wall. So I absolutely love this. I've had this for the entire year now, and it's I mean, it's just an action verb building, which I think is so important because it's always in the process. A new project is always in the process of being built, and so many people are
Hmm.
contributing to it. It's not just I am building Heat Watch or X person is building something, it's building something together. So I thought of just keeping it at that, so it sort of reinforces the collaborative work that we're doing, the fact that this is very community spirited, and at the same time a reminder that I have to keep sort of chipping at it every day. So I think this is my
That's great.
object that inspires and reinforces things for me. Yeah.
That's great. No, that's really great. Yeah, I don't think we probably should have a name for that picture frame. But if you got an idea, let us
Yeah.
know. Um, well, I
Yeah,
would love
sure.
to hear. I mean, we haven't gotten a chance to talk really all that much during the fellowship year, and I would love to have a chance to just know a little bit more about where this like Heat Watch. But it seems like the journalism. Like, what's the earliest memory you have from childhood that sort of pointed you in this direction? Heat Watch or journalism, or kind of like where you feel you're going right now.
Sure. From childhood, I don't think I've had a chance to speak about this either. So, um, I grew up in a low income family, and I think from early on, it was obvious to me that people around me had a lot more and a lot less, and I think
Hmm.
that's common for most of us around the world. We live in very unequal societies, and we're always aware of the fact from childhood that, of course, there are people who have a lot more. And then my parents made it a point to remind us to be grateful and to be happy with what we have, and to also show us that there are people around the world who have very little. And I think I was always conscious of that. And I think because of that early upbringing, I always also tended to ask more questions about why is something like this or why is something like that. And I think heat was something that it wasn't immediately obvious to me growing up, but I think as I started to work more, and I was working as a journalist, and when you're a reporter, you're always out there in the world. You're
Hmm.
not really, and especially when you're a field reporter, you're going to press conferences, you're going and reporting events, you are outside, you're talking to people. So you're not really sitting in an air conditioned or in an office space at all. So you're always out there and you're always engaging. And I think there were a couple of early on, I started working when I was 18. And there were a couple of trips early on when I was traveling to the length and breadth of the country. I was traveling to various parts of the
Hmm.
country where the heat, India has always been a hot country, but I was traveling to parts where the heat was absolutely unbearable. And I was seeing that activity and life was going on as usual. So, of course, there was farming going on as usual. There were people who were selling wares on the street. People were out and about in the market spaces. And perhaps I was not used to it, and I was covered in multiple layers of scarves, and I had like a massive bottle of water with me. And, I would want to run indoors at every moment I got. And when you talk to people in such spaces, they will typically respond to you by saying that, oh, this is how it is, this is life, there is nothing we can do to change it. So I think it was that early realization and very gradual radicalization to question that, but should things be like this? Should people have to be resigned to their fate and say that, oh, this is how it is, there's nobody who's going to come and change things, or we can't do anything about this either? So I think that realization sort of remained. And then from 2021, 2022 was a really bad heat wave in India. That was one time when it was all over the media. People were talking about it. Um, record temperatures were being recorded. And I think from that moment on, I started to think that because I started to actually firstly question that why are we not talking about heat as a disproportionate killer or a silent killer, because it does not impact everybody equally, just as any
Right.
disaster does not impact anybody equally. And I started to question that whether heat is getting as much attention as, say, flooding or earthquakes or landslides, which, as we've spoken about this before, which are more optical
Right.
disasters. You can see it in front of your eyes that this is the damage that this is causing. And I started questioning whether heat was maybe not getting as much attention, or were we not realizing how badly it's impacting
Hmm.
people at that moment. And I think that's what sort of led me to initially report on it, talk about it, approach this topic as a journalist. And then in 2023, when I was studying in the UK, I was in London for the year. And I think at that time, because I was away from the country, my desire to do something and my desire to act in a way um, that would still keep me connected to the country, to my country, and to what was happening really rose. And I really wanted to go back and start something which would be more impactful, which would be meaningful for me to do. And
Hmm.
that's how Heat Watch happened, and that's how Mira Fellowship happened as well.
Cool. Well, yeah, I would love to hear a little bit more detail. Do you remember when you were a kid, or whenever this sort of the idea of noticing that some people had more, some people had less? Do you remember what those things were that you noticed at all, or is there anything there before you learned from your parents that things aren't fair and there's things to do about it, and it became more abstract? Like, what do you remember as a kid of like the specifics?
Specifically, it was air conditioners.
Really?
So
Okay.
we didn't have air conditioners, and I would visit family members or relatives, and I would see that they had cooling equipment at home, which was usually coolers or air conditioners. And at first, it was obviously a shiny object that, this
Right.
is how it works. And for me, growing up, I was not exposed to an air conditioner at all. So it was really this shiny object that I saw in other people's houses. And it was fascinating at first. I was like, oh, what is this? What is this cool thing? And I remember
Uh-huh.
even in school, a lot of schools now, I mean, it's become so bad that many schools now need air conditioners. But we didn't have an air conditioner in school. And I remember a time when it used to get so hot that our teacher would tell us, just go to the washroom and just wash your face, wash your arms, and just let the water be. Don't wipe it off. Like, let the water evaporate. So you'd come back to the classroom and you'd just sit there and you'd just be sitting with wet faces and wet arms because you don't want to dry it off because the teacher has
Right.
said so, and also because it helps you cool your body down a little bit. So of course, one, I was it was hot, and we were all aware that it was hot, and certain months of the year were hotter than the others.
How
And
hot
some
does it
people,
get?
of course, had ACs. So I grew up near Mumbai, which more than heat, it was the humidity. So the
Right.
temperatures would be 37, 38 degrees Celsius at
Okay.
its hottest, but the humidity was 70, 80, 90%.
Ooh.
So we were sitting in 45 degrees really Celsius. We should do a quick conversion for Fahrenheit. Uh, but really, really hot, really hot. You can't.
That's hot. Yeah, that's like over 100 degrees
um,
Fahrenheit. Definitely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, and which is why, like, practices of just going back home and taking a nap for 2 hours, letting the hottest part of the day pass, and
Okay.
then when the sun is set, you wake up and you do your homework and you work on other things. So that's what began. But
And
income inequality was
did your
obvious.
parents
In
work in? Sorry, I think there's a little bit of a delay, so I apologize if I'm interrupting you.
Oh,
Did your parents? Did one of your parents or both of your parents work in heat? Like, what was their? What was your family's sort of interaction with the heat when you were a kid?
my mother is a homemaker, but my father did work in heat. My father worked with in the dairy industry, so he
Hmm.
was not outdoors, but he was working indoors in manufacturing and production setups, and he was around heat all the time, and in a way that again was very internalized that these are the working conditions.
Right.
This is how it is. And but he was working, he was an indoor worker, and that's all a privilege as well. But my mother is a homemaker, and we didn't. So which is why a better part of the day was just in peak heat, we would just be indoors, we wouldn't be allowed to go out. And interestingly, a lot of my relatives live in the north where it gets even hotter. And
Uh-huh.
usually in the summer vacations, we would travel to our relatives' place, and we would be staying there. And I think my memories of heat are even stronger there because it was in Rajasthan, which is the desert state of India, where my grandmother lives. It's so hot you can't step out for the large part of the day outside at all.
Wow.
So not just like the peak hours of the noon, but also like from early on, from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. You just can't step out because it gets so hot. And as children, you would be told that there is no stepping out. So you would just be basically indoors with family all the time. At best, you could go to the terrace where your feet would burn because of the floor and the direct
Wow.
sunlight. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's
I
great.
think growing up with heat was, yeah, it was. We all, I think, many children here, we all grow up with heat. We're very conscious that it's hot outside and
Well,
inside.
but it's fun to see that I didn't realize how close like heat watch is. It's not. It makes sense. It's like, oh, you see the inequities, you see this, and the inequities are represented by air conditioners, and then you go to heat watch. Was there a moment when this? Can you describe any moment that heat watch kind of came to you, or that you felt committed to it?
It wasn't when the idea came to me. It was well into the fellowship at the first
Okay.
event that we organized, first training that we organized. Because I think the idea, when I pitched it and when I started working on it, was abstract enough. I knew that I wanted to work on this. I knew that I wanted to work towards this in some
Hmm.
ways. But when we organized our first heat health awareness session or training where we invited construction workers to join us and to talk about heat, to talk about their health challenges, and we brought in a medical professional to address their concerns, drive more heat stroke awareness, best practices, so the range of things. We were expecting 15 or 20 people to show up, and over 70 people came. And
Really?
at
Okay,
that
wait, tell me
time,
more, tell me more of this story.
yeah,
No, I want to know more of this.
yes,
I didn't heard this. So tell me, like, what does the building look like?
yes.
Where are we? What happens? What were your expectations? Set it up a little bit more for me.
We're in a community center in Pune in India. We're working
Hmm.
with we are working with a partner organization, Ajivika Bureau, except they work with construction workers, outdoor workers, and formal workers. So we have a strong partner for this training session. And my contact at Ajivika Bureau, she and I are talking every day. We're trying to figure out how to do this. It's the first time something like this is happening. So
Huh.
we've worked on the curriculum, we've figured out what the medical professional is going to say, how are we going to carry this out as a focus group discussion where our participants are able to talk and present their views as well as speak about what about heat is really affecting them. So we've done all of this planning, and up till the last moment, we think at best we will have 15 people show up, because we're doing this training on a Sunday morning, because that's the only half a day when a lot of construction workers get their day off.
Mm,
So one, we're expecting them to not be at home and rest and come for this training, and on a Sunday. So we didn't expect a lot of people to come.
right.
So in our heads, we've put out like we reached the community center, we've put 15 or 20 chairs, and the other chairs are stacked up because we're not expecting a large turnout. And the first few minutes pass, and people are trickling in, and we're thinking, okay, you know, 7, 8 chairs are filled, and we think that okay, maybe we will reach 20 people at best. And then something happens, and then there's just people walking in and continuing to walking in, and then we have to go and just bring all the chairs down and set them up, because at last count there were 75 people in the room.
Wow.
And it was fantastic, it was amazing. I had not expected this. The partner organization had not expected this, and it really spoke to how grave the problem is and how much that we need a space to talk about it. Forget change. We
Right.
just need a space to address that this is a problem that's going to become more and more serious. And there are immediate impacts. People's health is affected. People are developing kidney stones, fungal infections, heat exhaustion. People are dying because of heat strokes. And I think all of those topics came up. People spoke about these challenges. People spoke about seeing people die. People spoke about their own health being
Mm,
impacted because of heat. And I think in that session, as I saw people talk and I saw what up space we had created for this conversation and think about next steps, I felt it felt I felt so inspired and I felt extremely committed, and I thought that this is something that is worthwhile, and something that I must continue to pursue. Yeah.
that's great. I didn't realize that. Wow, congratulations. That's fantastic. I mean, what does it feel like? What does it feel like to wake up knowing that you're working on this kind of a project for yourself, you know? Can you describe it?
It's I mean, of course it feels great, but it also there's a lot of I feel anxious as well, because it's a question of mortality. And I think whenever you're working on something which has such tremendous effects, I think it's a lot of pressure and stress and anxiety to move the needle, to do something
Right.
that could be useful, even though I'm very conscious that I'm one person and it takes a long time for any kind of change. So I also feel a huge sense of responsibility. I feel that once, given that I have this awareness, given that I know that this is a challenge that is going to become worse, I must put that knowledge to good use. I must do something that makes a difference. So it's equal parts. What a privilege to work on this, and what an immense responsibility. How do I make most of this? How do I make most of the resources that I have and the knowledge that I have?
So what does it look like when it's
What
successful?
about you? What about
Oh,
you?
wait.
I want to ask you this as well, that
Okay, go for it.
you and Co and Sarah have created this fellowship. You are supporting such amazing work. You're supporting social entrepreneurs, other types of entrepreneurs. How does it feel like to you? Does the privilege and responsibility bit echo with you, or do you think this is just, I'm very happy to just do this work?
No, I think both. Yeah, the privilege is that it's so interesting and it's such interesting people, and like the activation of it is fun. Like every single person is really activated and really excited about what they're doing, and to be in a group of those people is quite a privilege, I would say. Um, and then I feel like there's also the pressure. At least I feel the pressure of we have to make all these things happen, as quickly as we can, because so many of them are addressing things that are important. And like, how do we get more happening? How do you get more out the door? How do you like put the energy in the right place to make a thing go? And like, and sometimes I feel like I push too much, and then people are like, wait, I can't go that fast right now, or I can't. And so I think that there's the balance of how do you get something that goes as like smoothly and up and going well as it possibly can, and it doesn't kind of like run into as many bumps. I feel like at first I thought, and I think when you're younger you feel like if I just work as hard as I possibly can, that's as fast as it can possibly go. um, but I don't think that's actually true, because then you burn out or you run into something, or you're so sort of tunnel focused that you can't see a better way to get somewhere. And so I think that's been the fun learning, like because everyone is working on different projects, but they're all working on the difficult thing of taking something from nothing to something, or kind of putting it out into the world. You start to learn to recognize when someone's like banging their head against a wall, and what can you say to like help them just go around rather than just keep doing it. Or when do you just step back and say, okay, you got it, like just keep going with what you're doing. So yeah, I would say it feels both like responsible and quite a privilege. Absolutely. I like this
Yeah,
asking me
yeah,
questions.
that's
This is the
that's
first
very
time
true.
it's happened.
Wow.
um,
we need a
it's
we need
great.
a podcast with just your journey and experiences. Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we could do that at some point. Um, okay, so tell me a little bit about what it looks like in success. Like, what is this? So you have this big responsibility. You have something that seems to really resonate with people. If you're getting 70 people at the first thing, I'm sure you've had other events now that have gone well, and people want this. Where does it? What's success to you? Like, what's success? I mean, you could break it into like a year, 5 years, and 10 years, or something more overarching. What? How do you think of success at this moment?
It's a very difficult question because I think ultimate success in this field is eliminating heat stroke deaths or people dying because of heat strokes, which is such a massive undertaking because it requires equal parts policy changes, healthcare systems being prepared for this, as well as awareness on ground where people know that these are the practices they have to follow if they come across or are experiencing heat stroke themselves. So I think the ultimate success is that. Ultimate success is that nobody is dying because of challenges, because of heat. And that extends to other climate justice issues as well. So the intersection of economic justice, social justice. Why are people working in such terrible conditions in the first place? How can we support that? How can we change that? So success is really a lot. It's something that would completely transform our societies. So I
Okay,
tend to
so
I try
something
to
small.
not I I try to not yeah I try to not think about that sometimes, because even though that ambition is great, and I think many, not just Heat Watch, we're very very small, but many organizations are working towards that goal, and I think that's a great success to have in sight. But I try to think about more immediate things. So how many people are we able to reach? How many such trainings are we able to conduct? Are we able to sort of come together with the right demands of government bodies, of employers, and say that these are the changes that we want? Are we able to do the right kind of studies and research, pointing policymakers in the right direction? For
Hmm.
example, which is the heat and health topic, that heat has don't just think about mortality, but heat has tremendous impacts on people's health, which means that people's productivity is going to be impacted. So in
Mm.
business language, or if you're thinking about economic growth, then you have to think about this, because if people are going to fall ill, they're not going to be able to work. So these are the kind of things and goals that I try to keep in mind, to make it easier for me to also continue working, and not feel paralysis at the thought of, oh, this is completely unattainable.
Is there any kind of like social change or kind of regulation change that that's happened in the past that's maybe something that's different that you draw parallels to, or that you could draw some makes sense?
Yes, quite a bit actually. Air pollution, I think, is an issue that I often go back to, and I think about various moments in many countries, many cities, and their fight against air pollution. But just if you just take India, for example, um, people started to become aware that the air is getting more and more polluted. In the 80s, there was legal action.
Yeah.
There was huge amounts of community mobilization. There was a lot of philanthropic grant making to organizations who were talking about air pollution. There was the similar messaging that tried to make people understand that yes, it impacts people outdoors without air filters. So similar to air conditioners, there are air filters in air pollution, which rich people can have in their homes, and they can keep themselves safer. But they have to step out at some time. And similar to heat, they
Yeah.
have people who are in air conditioned houses or cars. They have to step out at some time, at some point. Um, this is not to say that the problem of air pollution has been solved. But I try to think about the journey that campaigning on air pollution that campaigners have seen, and they've pushed for regulations, they've pushed for policy changes, they've pushed for stricter controls, they've pushed for social protection. And I think of that, and I think that we need to embark on a similar journey for heat and for other
Hmm.
climate challenges, where we need to make those connections even more strongly this time, that there is no climate justice without social justice. So there has to be living wages, there have to be maternity benefits, there have to be um, decent working conditions. So I think this is work that needs multiple lifetimes. But yeah, slowly, th- that's sort of the analogy I often draw. Yeah.
So more specifically, what are you working on right now? Like, not you at the beginning of the fellowship, you got your 70 people that came in. What's happened, and what's the big sort of specific thing right now that's on your mind?
One part is continuing the heat health uh, training or awareness sessions, and we're keen to really build that up. So we started out by approaching workers, unions, rights-based groups directly, to see
Hmm.
if this would be impactful, and if this is a model that we can replicate. And we have been able to do multiple such sessions, and we think this is something that now needs to be scaled up. And I'm keen on now working with healthcare professionals. So India has this system of social health practitioners, which is this tradition from several decades ago, where volunteers are trained in best health practices, which would be vaccination, family planning, etc. And they can go door to door across villages in India and provide this information. So they act as mobile doctors, but not
Hmm.
exactly doctors, but they act as mobile healthcare professionals to people who cannot access this information, or for whom access has not been guaranteed. And that's an area that I'm very keen to step into, to train healthcare workers like that, who can then take the knowledge of heat
Wow.
preparedness, heat stroke preparedness and response, so that we're able to get scale and we're able to reach a lot more people. So I'm keen to continue working on the heat and health aspect, which is sort of one area of work. And the other area of work is continuing to push for regulations and policy changes, uh, which starts from the notification of heat wave as a disaster in India.
Right.
And several other parts of the world actually do not have this notification. So it's important to push for that. But that again is just the first step. There's a lot more that would need to be done for it to actually be impactful. And the final thing is trying to trying to collect and present accurate data for people like for people who can be allies and who can help take this movement forward. So we recently launched a report where we did media analysis of the number of people who died because of heat in this year alone.
Hmm.
So this year, I'll just recap, was the worst heat wave in South Asia in a century. So the worst in 100 years. And the number
Hmm.
of people who died, our guess was way more than the official figures. We didn't have the the capacity to try and unearth these numbers at a hyperlocal level. So we chose a proxy of using media reports to see how many deaths were the media reporting, and we've compiled and collated that information and we've put it out as a report, and it's been
Hmm.
months in the making. So I'm really glad that we put this number out. So the official number of deaths is 110. In 17 states in India, we found about 736 deaths. So seven
Hmm.
times more than what the official number is. And the purpose with this is not really doom and gloom, or to say that heat is going to come after us and we're all going to die, but to say that we need accurate data, we need accurate information,
Right.
and only when we have this accurate information can we push for improvements and safeguards and changes. So, go, this is for a small operation as Heat Watch. This is quite a lot of work. It's challenging to keep continuing to do this, but I want to continue working on data as well, so that we can build more collaborations, allies, and solidarity, and work on this together.
So you have the gathering of groups and making awareness with groups. You have writing reports and collecting data, getting new numbers out there. Um, and so, and what? How do you affect policy? Like, what's your strategy at this point to affect policy? Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I
Okay.
think at the moment, what we're trying to do is pay through these sessions where we are the people on the ground. We
Hmm.
try and identify what um, how is heat impacting the specific worker group that we are working with. So challenges for X worker group will be different for Y worker group, even though the larger ambit of social protection remains the same. So we try to work with the union rights-based group, NGO, with working with the worker group to try and identify certain demands or certain changes that are essential to improve their working conditions. And we take these representations to the government, to the immediate
Okay.
government, and say that
Right.
these are the changes that need to be implemented. So at a local level, that's the work that we're doing. But at a national level, we're working with organizations who are also working on this topic. And that's a different set of representations based on years of research that has been done on this topic, years of studies, by scientists, by several other professionals who are working in this space. And there is already a list, or people have already identified changes that are essential to deal with this, to deal with upcoming heat waves. And then our work is really advocacy and continuing to push that these changes should be made through representations, through meetings, through social media, through newspaper articles, op-eds. So trying a gamut of things to continue to push
Hmm.
for implementation of guidelines, of recommendations, of changes that are already identified by government bodies themselves, by scientists, by practitioners. So at a national level, that's the policy change, but at the local level or at the state level, it's what the workers and it's people who are working outdoors and what they really need, and the amenities or the changes in working hours, or say, or vests for construction workers. So specific changes that they need to continue to
Hmm.
work in these conditions.
That's great. That's very, very specific data. I like it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so what are you what are you most proud of what's happened so far? And just a short answer. What are you most proud of?
Just being able to get this off the ground, I think, just from an idea to actually
Hmm.
be able to do a few things and take this forward. Still have a long way to go, but just being able to do this much, I think it has been a great learning experience.
And what's the most difficult at the moment?
What's the most difficult thing about doing this work, or
No, like
in
right now,
general?
what is the thing that's difficult? Like at this particular moment, as you're trying to do whatever, what the work that you're trying to do right now, what's proving difficult? Just like
Yeah,
in a kind of builder perspective, like people all around the world are trying to do things.
yeah.
Tell us what's difficult right now about this. Not that you won't get through it, but
It's a very big challenge, and the fact that heat is seasonal in
uh,
various parts of the world. So as the heat passes, we stop thinking about it. When we stop feeling it, we're not really thinking about heat, because relief is such an interesting concept. The moment you're relieved, you don't want to think about what made you so
mm,
uncomfortable in the first place.
right,
So um, media, social media, online media, everything is dominated. The news cycles are so short. Everything is dominated by what's in front of you right now. So maybe it's flooding. Maybe a while later it would be earthquakes, landslides, tsunamis, storms. Hopefully, none of that happens around the world, but it is the news
right,
cycle will move on to the next disaster. And then to say that, but we need to continue thinking about heat, or we need to continue thinking about every disaster from the lens of social justice, that is harder, because people have
right,
heat has passed and people have moved on to other topics and other issue areas, all of which is very, very important. But to continue to talk about heat, I guess sounds a bit dated. Where people talk, it's why are you talking about heat? It's raining, but heat is important, because even when it's raining, there are low income settlements in
right.
various parts of the world which are facing very high temperatures because they don't have thermal insulation, they don't have air conditioners. So it's a topic that still needs to be spoken about, but yeah, it's not considered topical, it's not considered something that's important at the moment. So that's a big challenge.
That's a really fun problem. I mean, to think like story wise, narrative wise, how can you keep
Yeah,
how do you make something that is gone like well, one thing that you feel relief from? I think that's a great point. It's like, oh, now I feel relief from the heat's gone, but how do I prepare for it next time? Um, yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious to just come up with various story sort of marketing campaigns of how do you pitch heat
yeah,
when it's not warm? There must be some fun answers there. What do you what do you need help with?
yeah.
Like from the mirror community or from the larger community, or is there anything that people could help you with right now that we're listening to this?
I think spread the word, continue to drive more awareness. That I think would be an excellent message. I still speak with people, and there is an aha moment in their minds when they hear that heat is not impacting everybody equally. that there is a very disproportionate impact of heat on people who are working outdoors or who are working in very hot conditions. And I think continuing to drive that awareness and continuing to demand and ask that we need to have protections and when we need to think about climate from the lens of social justice, I think that would make a huge difference. Each of us who understands this and feels this, we will be able to become better advocates for change, not in a not I'm not talking about personal changes, but I'm talking about being able to together drive more systemic change. But it begins with understanding and educating ourselves that there is widespread income and wealth inequities in the world, and we need to be conscious about who is really being affected and what can be done to safeguard that. I think that awareness and education is very, very crucial, and it's upon all of
Mhm.
us to learn about that and to act accordingly. That would
Okay,
be my
I like
big
that.
message for today. Yeah.
Is there anything like specific that you need help with yourself, like in order to keep doing this, or and it doesn't have to be, but
Yeah, I think I'm at the moment exploring a few things. So
hmm
one space is definitely how to, which has been, I've not been able to do much about it. It's been how to engage with businesses on
mm,
how to on protecting their workforce. I think that's a major thing, but the biggest challenge there is that it's not their immediate supply chain that is affected, but the people they're contracting out to.
right,
So how to get businesses to say that they will only work with contractors who follow certain guidelines.
right,
I think that's the that's a very big piece of the puzzle, and it's been a problem across sectors. So garment industry faces this problem.
right,
Every industry where there is contracting out and where the contract outs are typically in really poor working conditions. How do we manage that? And how do we get businesses to take action? I think that's a challenge, and it would be great to hear from. It would be great to also just brainstorm and figure out messaging and ways in which businesses could be persuaded to do this, to do the right thing, um, at a time when maybe regulations don't exist or regulations are not being followed for various reasons. So how to make business community an ally uh, is is a big is a question. If somebody can answer it, please.
okay. No, that's a good one. I think that's great. I don't know the answer, but I think they're interesting ways. It's always fun to figure out how you can leverage businesses to do the right thing. Um, okay, so we're getting near the end here, and I like to do this. I think you may have seen it in the other podcast, but sort of having each fellow give us a little bit of insight into how they get in their own way. Just because I think we all sort of stumble over ourselves as we're trying to do this work. Do you have a story that's something that you do that sort of frustratingly gets in your own way and slows you down?
I think I already alluded to this a little bit because the challenge is so big. I tend to I
Mm,
or anybody working in this space will my it's very easy to think that, oh, but so much I would have to change for things to improve,
right,
and there's no way one person can do it, and it can tend to be it can be very demotivating to have that knowledge and realization that things are so bad, people's working conditions are so bad that it's going to take a long time before anything will change, and that is a sure way for me to not do any work that day because I have this knowledge that things are not going to change. And I think the only way, and to top this, is all the scientific research that's coming out almost every other day talking about how bad climate change is and what the impact of it on ecosystems, on agriculture, on food production, everything is going to be. And that and to be working on this means that I'm always around this information and I'm always trying to engage with, because I need to be updated, so I'm always engaging with this information, and that can be very demotivating and demoralizing. But what really helps, and I think this has been a big learning from the Mira community, is community. Don't try to do the work alone.
Hmm.
The more people you involve, and the more you ask for help, the further you will go. And I was not good at this. I'm still learning to become better at this. But I have really learned to let more people in, to talk to more people about uh, what I hope to do, and or ideas, and brainstorm ideas with them. And I think that that really helps get out of your own mind space and your own head, and try to do something. It may not be what you aim to do or what your ambition was, but you'll at least get out of the rut and be able to do something
Right.
positive towards that direction. And I think having people around, having cheerleaders around, having community around is so important. People who can perk you up and boost your spirits. I think that's the most important thing to doing any kind of to running your own project, or yeah, starting anything new.
That's great. No, I love that. I feel like that's so true, and so true to see how it affects everybody as they're trying to do things. And when you find a community and you commit to what you're doing, it's like people just start showing up and helping you, and it feels so different. I feel like when I was younger, it was always, okay, I want to impress people, and if I impress people or I'm smart enough or I do something, then they'll want to help me or something like that. And really, it's putting forward what you want to do, and then the people that also want to do that come to you, and then that's how you create the community. It's not because they're so impressed by you, it's because they want to join.
Yeah,
And it totally flips it, and
exactly.
it's like then suddenly you have people to do it with, rather than having to be impressive and stay impressive and always be on top. And so I'm really glad you said that. I think that's a nice way of putting it.
Absolutely.
um,
And it's been a learning for me that it's collaboration and not competition. So many of
right,
us have been taught this taught that we need to compete and we need to be the best and we need to impress. I've felt it, you felt it. And just that reframe, that it's called collaboration and not competition. We can do this together. Imagine what we would achieve if we did this together instead of competing with each other
right.
on a turf or on a grant or on something else. So it's collaboration and not competition, which I think is a very good, like, it's my motto for the rest of my life now.
Good. No, that's great. That's fantastic. It's totally true. Okay, so last question. um, what's an idea for the future that you've had that you'd like to have happen but that you're not going to do? Does that make sense?
My mind is going in a direction which I'm guessing you will tell me there's already something for that. Where I'm thinking, like,
It isn't.
you know, whatever idea you do have, like this, if there was a
Uh-huh.
way to just get it done, like your mind, whatever ideas you have in your mind, like I have many books in my mind, but I'm just not getting down to writing them. So is there a
Right.
way that the book can be written for me, and all I have to do is edit it? Is that possible? Like whatever
That's good.
idea,
Okay,
just
I like that.
yeah, yeah, just
Thank you so much for doing this call and doing this interview. It's been fascinating to get to know you.
yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing.